volta à Terra. Isto para vos dizer que o próximo orador vai juntar-se a nós, tirando partido das facilidades tecnológicas. Peter Singer é australiano e é frequentemente descrito como o filósofo vivo mais influente da atualidade. Merece em especial destaque os seus trabalhos sobre ética do tratamento dos animais e as suas posições sobre as obrigações dos mais ricos em ajudar os que vivem na pobreza mais extrema. Em 2005 foi nomeado uma das 100 pessoas mais influentes do mundo pela revista Time. A partir de sua casa na Austrália, Peter Singer gravou em vídeo a sua apresentação exclusivamente para esta Leadership Summit de Portugal. Ele fala-nos de como resistir ao imperativo tecnológico e é isso que vamos agora ver e ouvir.
Hello, I'm Peter Singer, Professor of Bioethics at Princeton University and Laureate Professor at the University of Melbourne. I want to talk to you about whether technology is leading the way in society and whether we can or should resist the technological imperative. By the technological imperative, I mean the idea that if we develop a new technology, then we must use it. And the idea that technology leads the way is that technological inventions set the direction in which we and our society are going. Now, I don't believe that this is necessarily the case, and I don't believe that it ought to be the case. That's why I'm calling my remarks resisting the technological imperative. But I want to make it clear that I'm not anti-technology. I'm anti the idea that technology is an imperative. That is, that it necessarily sets the direction in which we must go. And to give you an illustration of why I don't think technology should or has to set the imperative, I'll take an example from the field that I'm most familiar with, that is bioethics. We develop many new technologies in the biological and medical sciences. One of them that many of us are familiar with is the development of intensive care, in particular respirators, that enable us to keep people alive in circumstances where previously we could not have kept them alive. And in many cases, perhaps in the overwhelming majority of cases in which we use that technology, it's clearly a good thing. Somebody may be brought into the emergency room of a hospital after a terrible accident. They're unconscious, they're suffering damaged. That means that they're not able to breathe unaided. And without the respirator, they would soon die. But the condition may be a temporary one. With treatment, they will recover in a week or a month. They will be able to walk out of hospital and resume their normal life. A wonderful thing, we would all agree. But there are other cases where that's not so. There are other cases where the brain has suffered irreversible damage, where the person will never again be able to breathe unaided, and indeed will never recover consciousness at all. Now, when that started happening, soon after the development of the respirator in the 1950s and early 1960s, physicians didn't really know what to do about these cases. They were people who were alive, their heart was beating, and that was the traditional definition of being alive, and yet they would never recover consciousness. They were taking up resources, they were taking up hospital beds, the family didn't know when they could grieve for them. And in time, we came to realize that we actually would have the option of transplanting organs from them to other patients with a much better prospect of resuming a normal life. That developed when Christian Barnard in South Africa performed the world's first heart transplant. So we began, as a society, to discuss what to do with these people. And eventually, we took a rather bold strategy. We changed the definition of death. We declared them to be dead if their brains had irreversibly ceased to function. This was an ethical decision. It was not a scientific discovery that they were dead. It was a change in the definition of death. And since then, we've been able to turn off respirators in people whose brains had irreversibly ceased to function, and we've even been able to remove their organs, their kidneys, their hearts and other organs, and transplant them to people for a better purpose. And I think that's a desirable thing to do and a good example of how we can control technology. It doesn't have to control us. Now, what is a parallel to that likely to be in the future with other technologies that we are now developing? The one that is perhaps most salient at the moment, and the one that I know many of you will be talking about, is the development of artificial intelligence, and through artificial intelligence, of intelligent robots that will be able to perform many functions that are today performed by human beings. Is this going to be a technological imperative that we have to develop? I would say no. Again, I would say we have choices, but the choices are going to be difficult ones. I think what we need to think about is, what ought we to do here? And by ought here, I mean, what is going to be the best for everyone who is affected by this technology? Now, clearly, one of the immediate consequences of this technology will be that human beings, human workers, will be replaced in many occupations by machines, by robots, by algorithms directing computers to perform various functions. That's already happening. Jobs are changing because of technology. And it will continue to happen, and most people predict that it will happen at an increasing rate over the years to come. In one sense, that's a good thing. Humans have always wanted to escape drudgery. We've developed shortcuts, machines that do things for us, that make it easier, and avoid a lot of hard work that used to require sheer physical labor. So in that sense, we can welcome this. But of course, we must worry about humans losing employment and not being able to find other forms of employment. And we must worry about how they will be able to sustain themselves, both physically and also psychologically, in terms of finding purposes in their lives. So I think there is clearly going to be an ethical imperative not to resist the robots, but to provide alternatives, both in the forms of providing income and providing purpose. I think we can do this. I think we can use some of the advantages that will come from the increased productivity of robots to pay a dividend, if you like, from that use of robots to everyone in society. We've had a lot of interest, increasing interest recently, in the idea of a universal basic income. We've had pilot experiments in universal basic incomes in many different countries, in developed countries like Finland and Canada, and in developing countries in East Africa. And I think this may be the future, that we guarantee everyone at least a basic minimum to meet their needs. But the second and perhaps more challenging problem is going to be to replace the sense of purpose that comes from feeling needed, from doing meaningful work, with other opportunities to do this. But I think it shouldn't be beyond our abilities to do that. Even after robots take over many of the basic labouring functions that we perform in manufacturing industries, for example, even after they take over white-collar jobs, clerical jobs, for instance, and a whole variety of others, perhaps even professional jobs, perhaps even a lot of the work that professionals like lawyers and doctors do will be better performed by artificial intelligence. Not entirely without human supervision, but reducing the need for human work in that area. But if that happens, we'll have a lot of people with opportunities to find other ways to make the world a better place. And I think that should be the goal that we're working on. We know that there are lots of problems in our world today. We need not only new technologies, but we need new strategies, new plans for trying to relieve suffering, for trying to provide a decent standard of living for everyone in the world, for overcoming problems like climate change, for working for more peaceful outcomes to some of the world's conflicts and disputes, for resettling people whose place of living has been destroyed, perhaps in a civil war or perhaps as a result of climate change, which could increasingly happen. And many of these, I think, will require direct human work. That is, people will require contact with other human beings, and they will require a caring attitude towards others in order to overcome the human problems, not the technical problems, but the human problems. And I don't believe that these issues can be solved by technology. I know that there's been experiments with robot carers who can look after people, perhaps people with Alzheimer's disease. They can bring them what they need, people who are in bed and can't get out. But although perhaps with some people that may serve a function, I think the genuine human relationship is still going to be very important in many areas of life. And if we have more people free to provide that, and not necessarily to worry about whether that is paying them the income they need, because I'm envisioning a society in which, as I said, that is provided to all, then I think we can move forward into a future where people do have a sense of purpose, because we're still a very long way from making the world the best possible place that it can be. So my vision of a technological future and an ethical future is one in which we genuinely extend our concern to all our fellow humans living on this planet, and even to non-human animals, to every being capable of suffering or capable of enjoying their life, that we also do what we can to reduce the suffering that we currently inflict on them and to provide them with at least a decent form of life. And I think that we can, in that way, move forward with technology, but with a technology that we shape in accordance with our most fundamental values. Thank you very much for your attention.